Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next election prediction video. We're getting really close to the midterms, guys, and we are going to go over the 2022 House elections today. I accidentally turned off the camera in my I accidentally paused the video on accident in this is my second time recording. I was like here for 40 minutes and then I realized, oh crap, I just turned off the I just turned off the camera. So yeah, gonna have to do this again. So yeah, let's get right into it. We're really close to the midterms. Democrats are doing well. Yada yada yada. Let's get into it right now. So in Alaska, I'm gonna put this as lean D. Mary Peltola is doing very well against Sarah Palin in a lot of these polling and a lot of the polling data. And I think that, she's kind of like the Sherrod Brown or Chuck Grassley of Alaska now. She's in Alaska. It's a red state, but it's a pro-choice state, and it's a state that really, is trending towards the Democrats. I really think Alaska will be a swing state in the future. Mary Peltola, she's. I think that she's kind of like, yeah, I think that she's a really unique Democrat. I think that she can win in, a very good environment, or in a pretty bad environment for the Democratic Party. Although I will say that the national environment is a lot better than it was just a year ago. It's not necessarily great for Democrats, but it being mediocre for the GOP in a year that has been the most favorable, that should be the most favorable to them out of any year in the 21st century. That is really bad for the Republican Party. And Sarah Palin, it doesn't really seem like Nick Begich, the third, is getting a lot of support in Alaska. It doesn't really seem like Republicans are really changing their minds about, not about putting Sarah Palin as their second choice, even, or as their first choice instead of Nick Begich, instead of ranking Begich over Palin. Even Sarah Palin ranked Peltola over um Begich. So yeah, I think Alaska's lean blue right now. In Arizona, I think Tom O'Halloran loses by, a likely margin in his district. I really don't see how he holds on here. David Schweikert's a good incumbent in the first district. It's a left trending district, but, he's a very unique kind of Republican. And, he's a very, he's kind of, he's like the Don Bacon of Arizona. I think that he can win, but he might be in trouble in 2024. In the 6th district, Ann Kirkpatrick is retiring. So I think that this, is a pretty easy flip for the GOP, but it does seem like it is narrowing up. So I think that Republicans will win it under 5 points, but it's going to be really hard for me to see how Democrats hold on. In Arkansas, nothing there, and also nothing in Alabama. California, we got some interesting races here. The 13th, I don't think is going to be too competitive for the Republicans. Might have been a flip a little while ago, but I think that they can do pretty well. A lot of these districts down here in Southern California, pretty good for the GOP. I think Katie Porter will win by a likely margin. She's, got a lot of money. I think that she can, win by a pretty sizable amount in the end. In the 22nd district, David Valadao, I think, barely eked it out against, a not a pretty bad incumbent in 2020. I think that, and the fact that he, really didn't have, a Trump endorsed, primary challenger in his open primary, the fact that he really struggled in the open primary in California, it almost makes me think that Donald Trump just did not even endorse a candidate in the race because he knew that the Valadao was going to lose anyway. He's a very moderate Republican, but it's such a left trending district, I don't think it's enough for him to hold on. Similar with Mike Garcia, he did not vote to impeach Trump, but he actually voted to overturn the 2020 election results. But then he also voted for the marriage equality bill, so he's kind of all over the place. But I don't think that's going to help him in this district, and he barely won in 2020. I mean, look at this, 0.098%. I do not know how, he can win a second term. He could, but it'd be very close. In Colorado, I think Lauren Boebert will win. I don't think there's really much debate to that, even though she is a very controversial incumbent. But I do think she'll win by under 15. The 7th district, Ed Perlmutter is a retiring, but I think his district will be a lock for Democrats pretty much. The 8th district, though, I'm really conflicted about, but I think that Democrats will narrowly lose this district. I think Joe Dea could, he could do well in the Denver suburbs, in Colorado, though I do think that his support might be overestimated in some of those polls, and I do think, it's not impossible for Democrats to win this seat. Like I think it's a tilt Republican seat. It's a very close race. It's going to be one that we're going to be watching very closely on election night. In Connecticut, the fifth district and the second are likely. Not to say there, Delaware, nothing there. Florida, Charlie Crist gave up his seat to run against Ron DeSantis, which he was going to do anyway. But I mean, he actually resigned. He didn't just, wait until the term was up, because he would have been forced out anyway, since he was, not running for re-election in the House. He was running against DeSantis, but he actually has now officially resigned. So the seat is open, but Republicans will win the seat pretty much. And Stephanie Murphy is not running again, so her seat's going to be a pretty good target for the GOP. Maria Salazar, she won pretty narrowly in 2020, but you also have to remember that this map is pretty much so favorable towards the GOP. And yeah, I think that she can win by a pretty good margin. Of course, this is the DeSantis map. DeSantis got complete control of the Florida redistricting process because the GOP legislature just could not agree or could not compromise with him. Because they gave up essentially because DeSantis just wouldn't relent. In Georgia, I think Sanford Bishop's a good incumbent. I think that Raphael Warnock and Stacey Abrams will do well in this district. It's a pretty, typically good, a pretty typically blue district. It's a Biden plus 11 district. Bishop, is a good incumbent. This could have been interesting. Have we had the same environment that we had back in 2022 or back in 2021 after Glenn Youngkin won the Virginia governor's race. So yeah, I think the Bishop, but I think Bishop, wins by a pretty good amount. In Illinois, skipping over Hawaii and Idaho because they don't really have much to talk about. The 13th district, I think, is pretty, it's an open seat. I think it'll be pretty good for Democrats in the end. The 17th is very, very close. Another really competitive race. I think Sherry Bustos, retiring does help Republicans win the seat. It increases their chances at winning the seat, but I have it as tilt blue because of the row effect. I think Democrats will do better in Illinois than a lot of people expect. So yeah, I think that's gonna go tilt blue, but that's a very close race. In Indiana, I think Frank Mervin will win by a likely margin. This race could have been a lot closer, had we had like an actual red wave, which I mean we still might, but I mean, it's getting a lot better for Democrats. I think it's a pretty neutral year right now. It's slightly red leaning. It's a Biden plus 9 district. I think Frank Mervin will win by a comfortable amount. In Iowa, we got some interesting races here. The second and first were pretty competitive in 2020. They're not going to be super competitive in 2022. Marion, the first district might be interesting with MMM, but she looks like she might be in a bit of a competitive race, but she's a very strong incumbent. She barely eked it out in 2020, but she's in a much better position now in her district. It's Trump plus free. I think Sydney Axney might be able to win in the third district now. She is a good incumbent, and I had this race as a Leonard last time, but I think that she can narrowly pull it, or not narrowly pull it off. I think she'll narrowly lose, but this is a very close district. I don't think that the row effect though is going to have nearly as much effect in Iowa, which is not a very pro-choice state compared to other swing states, as it will, on other, you know, in other districts across the country. I think Chuck Grassley and Kim Reynolds will do pretty well in this district, and yeah, I think Grassley might do a little bit worse than usual in Iowa. I think that's a likely red race, but I mean he'll still win this district hands down. In Kansas, Laura Kelly, I think, always outperforms. I know that we're talking about Sharice Davids, but this is the bluest part of Kansas. It's a very left trending seat. Um, I think it's got Topeka in it, if I remember correctly. No, it might not have Topeka in it, but it's a very left trending district. It's got Kansas City, the Kansas City area, and the suburbs in it. Sharice Davids is a strong incumbent. She's in a Biden plus 5 district. Amanda Atkins is a good opponent for her, in turn from an objective standpoint. But Kelly, being on the ballot and the abortion referendum failing by such a large margin, much larger than it was expected to, along with a very popular Democratic incumbent governor who, outperformed expectations in 2018. I think that Sharice Davids can hold on by a pretty good margin. In Maine, a very close race here. I think that, in a Trump plus 6 district, I think Bruce Polkwin narrowly beats it out against Jared Golden. He only lost by 1 in a blue wave year to Golden. And the only reason why 2020, why 2020 was such a good year for Golden in terms of margin was because the GOP really didn't invest in this race. There was not really a very good candidate for the Republicans here, and they pretty much gave up on this race. In theory, Golden should have been really vulnerable, considering the fact that a lot of his fellow Democrats lost their re-elections. That won by such small margins as he did. But he's a very moderate Democrat, and I think he will do a lot better than Biden did in this district. But I don't see it being enough to get him over the hump. I don't think Roe is going to have a huge effect here. It's, it's a pretty pro-life district. It's pretty socially conservative, and I think Paul LePage, well, I think he's a little overrated of a candidate by many. He's not a terrible candidate, and he will do fairly well in Maine second, and that will be enough to get Polk over the finish line, in my opinion. But it's still a very good, Jared Golden's in a good position. I could put this as lean red or tilt blue. It's I kind of like this race, kind of like changes. Like my opinion on this race changes with the day. So yeah. In Maryland, Dan Cox is going to drag down Republicans in Maryland at the top of the ticket. David Trone, I think, will do pretty well. He'll win by a likely margin. In Michigan, Republicans really screwed themselves over with John Gibbs and Tudor Dixon. I think Hillary Scholten will flip the seat. If Peter Meyer had won the primary, this race would have been lean, possibly even likely red. But because Gibbs is such a controversial opponent or candidate in this left trending seat, around the Grand Rapids area, I think Scholten can, win by a couple of points. I think Dan Kildee can also win by, he won by 12 points in his old district, in which Biden, I think, only won by 4. He's in a Biden plus 2 district now, so I think he can win by around the same margin as Biden did in this new district, but, Kildee's got a lot of appeal, name recognition in Michigan, and with, Roe being on the ballot and, with the abortion referendum, in Michigan, not to legalize abortion, but to actually, not to outlaw it, but to legalize abortion being on the ballot is going to help him in this district. And I think, Tudor Dixon being at the top of the ticket's really going to hurt the GOP, which is another reason why I think Alyssa Slotkin will narrowly eke it out in this district. It's very close, but it's a suburban district, and I think she can barely hold on. John James, though, in the 10th district is not a very good candidate, but I think he'll narrowly win against Carl Malinga. But this race could, go to the Democrats. This race, I think, my John James might be being overestimated. He's lost statewide twice. He came pretty close in 2020. He did better than Trump did, against Gary Peters. That was a pretty big surprise that he came so close. But, he still lost twice. He also lost to Debbie Stabenow. But, yeah, in Michigan, I think he narrowly ekes it out. In Minnesota, I think that this race is lean D, and the second district is lean D. I think the first district, though, considering it was pretty close in the special election, I think it'll be a likely red seat. It'll be more than it was in the August special election. I think Brad Finstad will do all right. He's not going to lose, but I think with Scott Jensen's campaign for governor kind of collapsing in Minnesota, even though he was one of the better candidates the GOP put up, I think that he'll probably be able to get by. Not Jensen, but Finstad. You know, I mean, he was going to get by anyway, but you know what I mean. Montana, Republicans are going to win the first district. It's just going to be less than 15. It'll be a likely margin, but it's safe by probability. Same thing with Nebraska's first district. It'll be a larger margin for Mike Flood than it was in the special election. Patting Panzine Brooks is a good candidate. She only lost by 7 points in the special election, but it's Nebraska. This was a Trump plus 11 district, so I think it'll be pretty good for Mike Flood. Don Bacon, he could be in trouble in 2024, and him supporting a personhood amendment could hurt him, against Tony Vargas. He won against the socialists pretty much in 2020, and the district barely got more Republican, than it was in 2020. It was a Biden plus 7 district, and now it's only a Biden plus 6 district, but it's still, pretty much the same. So I think Bacon narrowly wins, but not by an overwhelming amount. Nevada too could be likely, but I think Mark Amati is a pretty good incumbent. It's safe by probability. The fourth district and the first district, pretty Dina Titus and Stephen Hosford are pretty good incumbents. Nevada being a super pro-choice state will get them over the finish line, and so will Catherine Cortez Masto probably. Susie Lee, I think similar story. Adam Laxalt's a good candidate in the Senate race. I think the Nevada freeze a total toss-up, but I think Susie Lee can, win in this district. It's a Biden plus 6 to 7 district, so I think that she can narrowly eke it out. But Democrats are kind of struggling in Nevada right now, especially in the Senate and governor's elections. In New Hampshire, first district, Chris Pappas is probably going to win against Caroline Levitt. She's a pretty, extreme candidate, so I don't think that she's going to do too well. In the second district, I think that Ann Custard can win, by over 5 points. Maggie Hassan will help both of these incumbents in New Hampshire down the ballot. In New Jersey, you got Tom Malinowski losing in the seventh district by a lean margin. Tom Keene is a very good incumbent, or not. He's not the incumbent. Tom Malinowski is a pretty good incumbent. He's running against Tom Keene Jr., who is the son of I think the former governor of New Jersey. And that's going to help Keene in this race. This was a pretty hard district for Democrats to hold on to. I still think they're not favored here, but it's a lot closer than it should be. In New Mexico, I think that a lot of people are overestimating Yvette Harrell's chances at Gabe Vasquez's chances at beating Yvette Harrell in this race. I think Mark Ronchetti will help Harrell in the end, but it is a left trending. It is a pretty favorable map to the Democrats in New Mexico. It was kind of seen as a dummy mander because Democrats kind of tried to make the second district more attainable by but weakened their positions in the first and the third. So yeah, in New Mexico too, I think Ron Chetty will help Harrell, who is someone who won in the old district by 7 points. It's a Biden plus 6 district, but I think that she can barely hold on by 2 or 3 points. Yeah, I think Ron Chetty will help her, even though his campaign for governor seems to be running into some hurdles. In New York, I said New York, sorry, New York. 22nd district, John Katko's retiring. I think Democrats can narrowly win this race. It might be lean blue in the end. 18th district, Pat Ryan. I don't need to talk about that one. He's moving into the 18th district due to redistricting. I think Mark Molinaro narrowly wins in the 19th district because he's not up against Pat Ryan. He's a good candidate. He wasn't a bad candidate. It's just the fact. I mean, Pat Ryan should not have won that race. He really outperformed his polling data. But I think and it does look pretty bad for Molinaro from polling perspective. But I do think that he can narrowly pull it off in this district without Ryan here. But it could be a tilt blue district. That's a pretty competitive race. Same in North Carolina 13. Bo Hines, I think, is just kind of he kind of he kind of stumbles along with his words from what I've heard about him. I think Wiley um, Hickel can barely win this race. I think Sherry Beasley can help Democrats down ballot with black turnout. But that's not a guarantee. Beasley will do well with black turnout, no doubt. She'll do better than the average Democrat in North Carolina with African Americans coming out to vote because she is African American. But I don't know if that'll translate down ballot. So North Carolina 13, I think it tilts towards the Democrats, but it's a very close race. In Ohio, we have some news here. I think that Steve Chabot's district, he is an overperformer, but he doesn't seem to be quite as moderate as some people see it say he is. He voted against certifying the 2020 election results, and he's in a Biden plus 9 district. He was in a Trump plus 4 district in 2020, so I don't see him being able to get over the hump. I think that it's just too great. It's just a really hard to build a pathway for him. If he does win, that'll be a testament to the Republicans and Steve Chabot. But the math is not there for him. He'd have to overperform by 9 points. Tim Ryan will help Democrats down ballot in Ohio, though I do think, he's Ryan's not going to win that Senate race unless something crazy happens. In the ninth district, J.R. Majewski just got the Republicans pretty much just gave up on this very flippable seat, with J.R. Majewski lying about his military service in Afghanistan. Marcy Copter is not super familiar with this district. She was in a safe blue district for, most of her career. And, this looked like a very vulnerable seat for Republicans, but, surprisingly, they've just given up on the seat. They've said they pretty much surrendered it to Democrats, because, they think that, it's just not a winnable race anymore. I think it still is. I think J.R. Marszewski can beat out Copter. It's a very right trending district. It's a Trump plus free district. It's a lot redder than it was than Copter's old district was. But I think, with Marszewski not getting enough money, I think Copter can nearly pull it out. And so it's tilt D. Oregon 6, it's likely, I think. Why won't this? Oh, wait, I have it on lean. Huh. So that's likely. The fifth district, I think Jamie McLaurin Skinner winning the primary against Kurt Schrader was not a good thing for Democrats, and with Betsy Johnson and Christine Drazan on the ballot in the governor's race, that could really flip this seat. So I don't know exactly how this race is going to go in Oregon 5, but I do think it'll be tilted. I think I think McLeod Skinner can narrowly pull it off in Oregon. It's a blue state. Its governor elections are pretty competitive, but Ron Wyden will also help Democrats down ballot, in a traditionally blue state anyway. In Pennsylvania, we have some interesting races here. Matt Cartwright won in a Trump plus 4 district by 4 points in 2020. He's in a Trump plus 3 district now. I don't think he'll win by 4 points like he did in 2020. I think the margin will be smaller, but I do think he can win by over 1%. This still is a good opportunity for the GOP to pick up a seat, but I just don't see it right now. I think that Matt Cartwright can, barely, he can hold on, but he could lose too. The lean is not safe. The seventh district, I know I had this as tilt D before, but I'm gonna keep it as I'm gonna flip it over into the Republican column. It's tilt R. I just don't think that Susan Wild's got enough, support in this district, to be able to win. The math is just really not in her favor. In the 17th district, Conor Lamb not running really endangered Democrats in this district, but I think Chris DeLuzio can win with Fetterman and Shapiro on the ballot. Pennsylvania is a state where the GOP has royally screwed up in. In Rhode Island, this race could be pretty competitive with Alan Fung and what's his name, Seth Magaziner or Magaziner or however you say it. I think it's Magaziner. This race could be a lot more competitive. Rhode Island's kind of a wacky state politically. It's pretty blue generally, but it can be competitive in, statewide elections or more localized races. But I think the Democrats can win. Dan McKee will probably drag down Democrats at the top of the ballot, but I don't think, I don't think that race is going to be too competitive. I think it would have been more competitive had, he been primaried out, even though he's super unpopular. We've seen what happens, in previous years when you know, when an incumbent has been primaried out by their own party. In South Carolina, South Dakota, and Tennessee, nothing to say there. In Texas, we got some interesting races. Myra Flores just did not have enough good turnout in her special election to make me think she can win again against, Vincente Gonzalez, who's moved over into this district. So I think she loses by a likely margin. Even, right wingers think she's going to lose on, right wing election YouTubers don't, they even think she's not going to win. In the 15th district, Republicans will probably win the seat in South Texas. It's an open seat. Henry Cuellar, is in a really tough spot. I really don't know how this race will go. I think it's tilt D right now. He barely won that primary. So I think that, he's very vulnerable, but I think he barely pulls it off in the end. In Virginia, we have, Spanberg, I think, is running a pretty good campaign against Yesli Vega. I think that she has, Vega has an overrated chance of winning this race. It's a pretty, wacky district. It's a lot different than Spanberger's old district. And, so I think that she can win by, over 1 point. In the 10th district, I thought that this race could be a little bit more competitive with Hung Cao, but Jennifer Wexton's a pretty good incumbent. And it is a Biden plus 19 district, I believe. It's a 19, yeah, it's 19 points. So it might be likely, but I don't know how much appeal Hung Cao has in this district. Virginia too. I don't think that this race is going to stay with the Democrats. I think Elaine Luria is a good incumbent. She did outperform Biden in 2020, but at the same time, looking at her work on the January 6th committee, which is, I support that. I think it's great personally, but I don't know how well it's going to do with these moderate voters in Virginia Beach. I mean, moderate voters across the country are pretty, pro January, the they're pretty supportive of the January 6th commission. They're not like, they don't support the insurrectionists. But I think that, her work on the January 6th committee will hurt her with more conservative voters down here. So I think she narrowly loses, but this race is a lot more competitive than I originally thought. In Washington, I think Kim Schreier's seat, it's a lean D seat. I think Patty Murray will do all right here. Republicans really should just give up on flipping the Senate seat in Washington, and it's not really going to help them in the 8th district. They can still win this district, but it is a 7 point, is a Biden plus 7 point, or Biden plus 7 district. Jamie Herrera Butler lost her primary, but the seat is still going to go red, even though it was Trump plus 5. Um, you know, Joe Kent will win this race. It's safe by probability, but likely by margin. And finally, in the state of Wisconsin, in the third district, Ron Kind's not running. It's a very right-trending district. This race could be lean, but I don't know. I think Ron Johnson and Tim Michels, being at the top of the ballot, will help Republicans down ballot in Wisconsin, and they already do tend to do better, in House elections than they do in statewide elections. So yeah, with Ron Kind not, deciding to retire, and with Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers likely to lose their races, they could win them. I think Wisconsin, I think Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers could absolutely win their races. I think that, right wingers kind of overestimate or underestimating their ability to win, but I don't think they'll do too well in this area, with the white working class. So, in the final map, after all that, we've got 220 Republicans, 200 to 215 Democrats. Republicans win about 10 seats, flip about 10 seats overall. Democrats win 15 seats, in a very good position for them to take back the majority in 2024 should this result hold true. I'm sorry if I talked really fast, guys, but I got some other stuff to do um, today. So, yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. It's alright if you didn't agree with my prediction. If you didn't, make sure to comment down below what you didn't agree with, but don't be, don't be a jerk about it. Don't, say like, oh, you're crazy because you have this racist lean Democrat or something. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, just don't be that guy. If you want to, have a peaceful and, civil discussion, then just type something down in the comments. So yeah, like and subscribe to the channel, share it, turn on notifications, so you don't miss another one of my videos. Check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, and my comrade, Growlings666. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.